Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is the Steve Jones Show on a Thursday. News Radio 1070 WKOK. Steve Jones will soon be there from the Sunbury Motors Studio. Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. And online at sunburymotors.com. Matt Catrillo here with you in the producer chair. As normal, a loaded show today, but it surrounds the tough news that we got last night from Journey Brown, and of course head coach James Franklin announced it during his press conference last night. And Journey Brown done for his entire football career, diagnosed with a heart condition that is not going to be able to let him play football for the rest of his career. So it's such a shame for a guy who really was starting to make known for himself, especially with the game he had in the Cotton Bowl, and the expectations for him coming into this year. And you can tell Penn State's obviously missed him, but you got to really feel for the kid. You think you're finally on your way. You've waited your turn. You think you might have a chance even for an NFL career, looking at even beyond Penn State, and all of a sudden you have this happen on top of everything else that's been going on in our world right now. And it's just devastating news for him and obviously for Penn State. That broke around 6 o'clock last night, Steve. Just a really, really tough day for Penn State and what's been a tough start to the year.
Yeah, but it's a tough day for Journey Brown. Yes, it is very difficult, the emotion of it. You know, people are close to each other. I mean, just think of the people that you either are friends, that you work around, you work with along the way, and then put it into the context of being 18 to 22 years of age. And in the context of being 18 to 22 years of age, and they love this guy. I can tell you, they love it. If you're around Journey Brown, and I've been fortunate enough to be around Journey many times, you always has that smile on his face, always outgoing. Oh, can't wait to see you, happy to see you. The long list of what a guy like that is like. As a running back, let's get to the running back part of it. Well, let me start with the positive. Here's the positive out of it. They caught it. That's the positive. And thank goodness they caught it, because now by catching it, it gives Journey Brown an even better chance of having a long, happy, fruitful life. I think that's really important. It should not be left out of it. I know we're going to have Frank Bodani on the show tomorrow. Frank and I were both at the Palestra in 1990 when we found out that Hank Gathers had collapsed. And, of course, Hank Gathers was from Philadelphia. He and Bo Kimball both. They were from Philadelphia. So I'm in the middle of doing the game, and I think the game was think the game was with Duquesne, I think I'm doing. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting in this, instead of being courtside like I've been with both Iowa and Michigan State the last 2 times I've been in there, we were up in the box area or the press area doing the game. So I'm up in the rafter area, which at the Plestra is still a fabulous seat. But that's where I am. These are things that you remember. And they tell I'm like, what? And I was doing the game alone. I was not working with anybody that night because it was a snowstorm. I was like, what? Hank Gathers what? Collapsed. Well, then we get to the post game, we find out he not only collapsed, he passed away. Well, because of the advances in testing, they are able to get results like this where it can make a difference in the quality of life for an individual. And Journey Brown's quality of life has a better chance of happening because this has been caught in advance. That's big. Now let's get obviously to the tough part. Let's talk about, I talked about Journey Brown, the person, and his teammates love him. I can tell you that, I'm around him. So I know that they think the world of him. And that's what makes it tough. And not only that, everybody was expecting him to have a huge year. Journey Brown came into Penn State. And as I've said many times, I don't look at highlight tapes and so forth. The reason being is that I want to see them in a practice against comparable talent. How do they fare? So I try to keep my preconceived expectations down and really try to let it play out in front of me. Now, it's hard to do when, for example, somebody of the hype of Micah Parsons comes in. You are watching to see if he ends up being that kind of player. So, I mean, let's be fair. That happens sometimes. But the vast majority of guys that come in, they start with me usually with a blank canvas. Where, yeah, you've heard about them, but it's not of the hype of a Micah Parsons. How about that? So you do look at that with maybe a different eye. So he's in there, and I had heard, of course, I'd heard the story about the 762-yard, 10-touchdown performance that he had in a game. You sit back and go, that's pretty eye-popping. And I knew he was the sprint champion in the state, so I knew he came in with speed. I mean, you don't win the PIAA sprint championship in this state unless you're pretty darn fast. So I knew about that. But after that, I had some people say that a lot of people, in quote, that really follow recruiting. And I don't. I know we have Ryan Snyder on, we have Greg Pickle on, and others, that follow recruiting, Sean Fitz, that follow recruiting closely. Mark Brennan, I let them do that. I'll ask questions, but they know about it. I don't. And there are a lot of people, and I'm not talking about those guys. Okay, I'm talking about there were people who are in the fan base that follow recruiting really, really close that were negative about Journey Brown coming to Penn State. I think his other offers were not major programs. So, I knew about that. Well, as you know, on Sunday nights, they do the scrimmages for the non-travel players. Walk-ons, freshmen, guys further down the depth chart. They scrimmage on Sunday night. They get some work in. Gives the coaches a real chance to evaluate where they're going and something that's legit hitting. Okay? So the first time he's out there, breaks off a couple long runs, including a long touchdown run. I'm like, well, pretty good. So they come back the next Sunday, and I'm watching the walkthrough that they're doing, the corrections period. And then, of course, now they get to the scrimmage. And I'm watching the scrimmage. And out on the defensive practice fields where they did it. And he does it again. Right out of the gate, long touchdown run, then another long run. Like, holy mackerel. Now it gets to the point of the third one. All of us started referring to it as, well, as soon as practice is over, we'll get to watch the Journey Brown show. That's what we referred to it as when he was a freshman, the Journey Brown show. Because he put on a show every Sunday night. And I'll tell you, you know who loved the Journey Brown show more than anybody else? I mean, like really got into it? Was Saquon Barkley. Saquon really got into what Journey was doing out there. Loved it. It's like his biggest fan. What I saw in Journey Brown develop, though, was this. If you're going to play in this game as a running back, speed is really important, but at some point you need to do some stuff between the tackles. Not every play is going to be a sprint play to the outside. And you're going to have to do something between the tackles. He developed his upper body and running style where the more I watched him get inside, bang people, and gain yards with some power runs between the tackles. He also had the ability to get between the tackles and boom, and then burst one. He could do that. He became a better pass receiver. I mean, to me, he became a reliable pass receiver. And the final part, and let's go back to physicality again, he became much better as a blocker and in picking up the blitz. He was working himself into becoming a really, really well-rounded running back. And when I talk about the power and the speed, let's go back to his initial touchdown in the Cotton Bowl. Speed, boom, there's that burst that Journey Brown could bring. But then what made it such a signature run for him? He overpowered guys. Broke tackles, overpowered, lowered his shoulder, got a guy out of the way, and then scored a touchdown. That was the combination of everything I just talked about. That's why you felt when the Cotton Bowl was over with, you were so excited for Journey Brown because you felt that the best was yet to come. He was over 100 yards rushing in 5 of his last 6 games. And he's the only Penn State running back to ever have more than 200 in a bowl game when he rushed for 202 last December in Arlington against Memphis in the Cotton Bowl. So that's what makes this tough. That's what makes this tough. We're going to talk to Mark Wogenrich about this in the next half hour. We have the King today, Jerry Dulac today, but Tiger's been doing pretty well. Last I saw, Tiger was at 4 under par. DeChambeau finished at 2 under. Tiger, of course, gets the break of being able to play in the morning, which lapses into the early afternoon, but play the late round tomorrow. And his back can use that kind of break. We'll talk to Jerry about that and about the Steelers. Steelers are practicing as if Ben's going to play. I think they're assuming because the player that Ben was in contact, Ben does not have COVID. He's been testing negative. It was Vance McDonald, okay? But I was talking about you teammates, you can get to be tight with them and so forth along the way. And you can feel about that in the places you work. Matt and I are very tight. You know, I get pictures all the time of little Luke, you know, and that big smile he has when Mom's holding him and like that. Then kind of pouty when Dad's holding him. I mean, I know the kids' looks, you know. I know them all, you know, and Mark, you know, you get loyalty with people, you know, and look, for everybody out there, just, you know, okay, quote, the suit, okay, I am very loyal to Kevin and vice versa, right? That's the reality of it. Now, on the air, do I kid and have some fun, and it's almost like a cartoon character in some ways? Yeah, because that's just part of the show. Although some of it's true. In fact, fact, there's several segments of it that are very true, which makes it funny. But it doesn't mean I don't think the world of them. But that's, you know how I am with Jack Ham and vice versa. You know how I am with Dick Girardi and vice versa. Joe Putnam in baseball. It's the way it is. I mean, I'm a very loyal person. Very loyal. Some would say loyal to a fault, which is fine. That doesn't bother me, though, because that's the way I was brought up. In fact, my brother's on it in, 406 today? Go ahead, Matt. Ask him about how often the word loyalty was brought up in our family growing up.
I will.
It was something that was instilled in us growing up. Some fans may think I'm too loyal. I mean, obviously, Don sent his email today and feels I'm too loyal. I mean, essentially, that's what he was saying. No, that's essentially what he's saying. Right? Even though I told him I'd ask James about the fourth down thing, about instilling confidence in his team, and I did. I asked him Wednesday about it. And I was only guessing when I said that because I was trying to give an example. Okay, you're trying to instill confidence. I was talking about how offense hasn't been helping out defense and defense hasn't been helping out offense. That's the premise I started the show with on Monday. And I used it as an example without asking James whether it was true or not. I think Don took that the wrong way. That he said maybe the coach is out there saying, hey, look, I'm confident you can get it, and they don't get it. But the payoff is I'm confident in my defense you can stop them, and neither one happened for him because that's the pattern that's been happening. One hasn't been helping the other. So I asked James about it, and he said, yeah, that was what he was trying to do. And remember, Penn State's 1 of 4 in field goals right now, too, which is like you're not sitting there at the moment saying, hey, we're going to get 3 out of this. There's a lot of elements that go into decisions, and sometimes one that you don't think of is part of the reason. But that's a different topic. But, yeah, loyal. We were brought up to be loyal in our house. Blind, you're not loyal to bad people. You're loyal to good people. And it's a two-way street. Mark Wogenrich is coming up next. Great to have you with us today. Brought to you by Sunbury Motors on News Radio 1070 WKOK. When it comes to car buying, there's the other guy's way, and then there's the SMC way. The other guys force you into a vehicle you really don't want. The Sunbury Motors way lets you take the time you need to browse, ask questions, and take the test drive and think on it. For over 100 years, the Mertz family and all their employees have made your experience the most pleasant one you'll ever have. The other guys won't offer you the best price for your trade, no matter how much they say they will. The SMC way is their promise to provide you with the most money the market shows your vehicle is worth. The SMC way is to offer you all applicable factory rebates on new vehicles and generous discounts. Looking for a pre-owned vehicle? The SMC way checks each vehicle in a 200-mile radius to determine the lowest price, then beat it. It's the lowest price promise, just part of the SMC way. The choice is up to you. The other guy's way or the SMC way. The SMC way wins every time. Sunbury Motors Company in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury, and at sunburymotors.com. Selling more cars and satisfying more customers for over 100 years. Mark Wogenrich, SI.com, coming up in the next half hour. Jerry Dulac, Post-Gazette, Steelers Network, also at 4:35 today. And The King. Great to have you with us, brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is The Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
And back here on the Steve Jones Show, News Radio 1070 WKOK. Matt Catrillo here with you. Steve Jones is there in the Sunbury Motors studio. Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Mark Wogenrich, SI.com, is going to join us in a couple minutes here as we continue to talk Journey Brown and the tough news that we got yesterday with the fact that he will be ending his career, getting that heart condition that has now ended his career, cannot play football anymore. He announced that last night on his Instagram, and, of course, James Franklin announced that as well during his press conference last night. So Mark's going to talk to us about that and the Nebraska game and a whole lot more. Then we got the King coming up at 4:06 with our early week edition of the Pick segment.
Yeah, good to get that in there. Yeah,
And then Jerry Dulac.
Pretty good, but we're going to start out big here with Mark Wogenrich from SI.com. Always a pleasure to have him on the show. Mark, welcome. It is always great to have you with us.
Thanks, Steve. It's always great to be with you as well. Why am I watching the Masters in November, by the way? Make sense.
I know. Watching Bryson DeChambeau.
One hand is great, but...
Yeah, I know. Watching Bryson DeChambeau and watching Tiger. Of course, they're now done, but sure. Yeah, it's a little different. Really different. And no patrons. I mean, different. So what was Journey Brown's been out, and I don't think many people held out hope that he was going to still be a part of the mix for this particular season. But what was it like hearing the news that Wednesday night that this was it?
It was crushing. I mean, this is a player. He surprised me last year. You don't get a lot of those like pleasant surprises. Sometimes the guys you expect to see play really well, and others they come out. But he was really that guy to me last year. I wouldn't say out of nowhere, but he came from. I thought fairly, was a fairly big surprise that second half of the year with the way he just kind of transformed himself. I heard him use the term maturity a lot last year and then again this year, and it really it seemed to come to pass for him. So the fact that he can't play again, as he was just coming into his own, that's the biggest part that I guess crushes the spirit regarding Journey Brown. Is he had a chance? He's had a couple of other players, and I don't want to minimize anybody's reaction to this, but a couple of years ago there were a couple of freshmen who had this a heart condition diagnosed before they even played. So their career ended before it even got started. Here you had a career that was kind of getting into its own. And Jay Sider, the running backs coach at Penn State, pretty much said he thought he was going to be one of the better backs in the nation this year. And to lose that, and then to lose a football, an NFL career that could have been quite lucrative for him. For him to be positive, I think is going to go a long way. One of the things, I go back and I had an interview with him over the spring before this even came out. And his attitude always seemed to be, to me, to be the most infectious part of him. That he could be such a positive person in the wake of the personal things he had gone through prior to this. And James Franklin mentioned that, Jay Sider mentioned that. And that's what strikes me, is that I hope that continues for him. I hope he could build upon that attitude and be successful in whatever he chooses to do.
And I think that for him, you felt after the Cotton Bowl, the best was yet to come. And that was part of this.
Yes, yeah.
And that's the part that struck me, because the guy watched him go from a sprinter in practice to becoming a far more complete running back that could run with power. I mean, that first touchdown run against Memphis in the Cotton Bowl was a combination of speed and that power all at once, and that's why you looked at him and says he is really coming to his own.
Yeah, he was a running back in that game. And when I talked to him in the spring, he referenced that. He referenced that as kind of a launch point for him, that he wanted to learn receiving. He wanted to learn receiving and better blitz pickups and pass blocking, that sort of thing. Not learn, but get better at those things. He was getting bigger. He had gained, I think it was like 10 to 15 pounds, but said he was still as fast as he had ever been. I think he was really pushing toward a huge breakthrough this year. And it was funny, I saw him Saturday. I was watching the sideline last Saturday game against Maryland, and I saw this player kind of bouncing up and down the sideline and dancing, and he was wearing street clothes. And I thought, that looks like Journey Brown, but I couldn't tell because he had the mask over his face in the gator. And I saw, okay, he's hanging out with the running backs, and I did ultimately recognize him. I thought, that's really good to see. That's really, that he is, at that moment, his frame of mind and his attitude seemed to be in a really good place, not knowing that what he was, fully what he was going through and what he was about to learn.
Also, you and I know, being around teams enough, that the close ones, and this has always been a close team, there's a brotherhood. What do you think this has done psychologically? I mean, the players know about this, I'm going to guess. This wasn't something that came out yesterday, I don't think. I think it's something that they've known for a couple days, I'm guessing. But what do you think it does psychologically for other players who are also 18 to 23 years of age that see this happen to somebody their age?
Yeah, it could go a couple of ways. I think when we got players after before the first game, before the Indiana game, when James Franklin and Penn State initially said that Journey would potentially be out this season.
Right.
The players spoke about him. Two guys who really stuck out for me were Pat Fryermuth and George Stout. George Stout, of all people, as the kicker, punter and kicker, I don't know what kind of interaction he was going to have with Journey Brown unless he's like kicking off to him in practice, and they're going to be 60 yards apart. So that's not, that is not like a relationship I would think would flourish. And Jordan Stout was really just really refined in the way he discussed it. And he's called Journey Brown a role model for him. And he said, for me, we're the same age. So that struck me as really something to take note of. So I think they'd probably been processing this for a while, and then maybe the news hits them. As specifically now as it's final, maybe in some strange way it turns out to be, these kinds of things can be motivational rallying points too. It's odd that this news comes this week, and on Tuesday the Big Ten Network aired the 1-hour documentary about Adam Califero. 21 years ago he was injured. 20 years ago he came back and ran through the tunnel, and look what that did to them, the way that motivated them against Purdue. Maybe this Journey Brown news has that sort of impact on the team that, let's go win one for Journey.
So now that brings us to the next step in this, and that will be a trip to Lincoln to take on Nebraska Saturday. Two teams that need a win. Nebraska's playing its home opener. What early signs will you look for, Mark, in this game on Saturday from the Penn State point of view?
The first thing I would not want to see is a Penn State defense giving up a big play. It's happened back-to-back games now, right away. The first play of the Ohio State game, that first series against Maryland. You want to see them get stops. You want to see them get off the field, not give up something big. You don't want to. I don't think that you want to see Penn State trailing or going down in kind of a in that fashion, the big play fashion. They've got to get that under control. I think that's been a huge issue for them the last couple of weeks. I also want to see. I'd want to see Sean Clifford be a little more composed coming out of the gate. Maybe kind of run a series like he did against Indiana in the opener. That was still might have been one of their better series of the season. Came out of the gate right away, and then just this like tumble of mistakes happened after that. But I would not giving up the big play, and then I don't think the offense necessarily has to get big plays. right out of the way. Sustain a drive, move the ball, with Sean Clifford, get him some easier throws. See him getting him to make some easy throws, move the sticks, get some confidence, and then not give up something big. I think I probably even lean more on the defense in that way. I think for their sake, I don't think, if I'm right, Nebraska doesn't have a passing touchdown yet this season. I mean, their passing game has been just real wayward. So that would be deflating if right away the first touchdown pass is off a first series, something like that. I don't think you want to give up anything like that. I think you want to go in there and have that head of steam with, we've bottomed out, we can only go up, and then only to see something negative like that happen. To me, though, that's a real key.
Yeah, and I think at some point in this game, and I think it's going to happen, it has happened at least a couple times, Penn State hasn't had a takeaway in 9 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
The psychology of a takeaway. It can set up a short field for the offense and make life easier, demoralizes the other team. They haven't had that in 9 quarters, Mark.
Yeah, the last one, I remember the big one that stands out to me was the Lamont Wade fumble recovery.
Yes, at the end of the first half.
End of the first half against Indiana. That was you don't get any points out of that, but that was that changed. That was sudden change. And you're right, they're not producing sudden change at all. And I think you turn around and see guys then looking around. It almost seems like some of these guys are waiting for somebody else to make a play, maybe on both sides of the ball, and particularly on defense. That's an issue.
Yeah, it is. And I think early on you need that. When you look at Nebraska, you talk about their passing game, their 2 leading rushers are the 2 quarterbacks. This is very much a quarterback-centric running game for them. We have no idea who's going to start. When you look at Nebraska, what do you see?
I kind of see a little bit like Penn State, where you're putting the ball in your quarterback's hand, and there's times you just don't know what's going to happen with it. They just seem to be doing it with 2 quarterbacks instead of 1. I think that McCaffrey might be – I'd read something about Luke McCaffrey, the redshirt freshman, that he's better, or at least he showed some signs of being better in their tempo offense, and maybe that could be something that Nebraska could use in a game like this. To me, it's just going to be those 3 quarterbacks. Who's better in that game? I'm kind of sensing we're going to see both. Maybe Penn State runs out a situational offense with Will Levis if it gets into a position to do so, like it tried against Ohio State. That situation, maybe they try a red zone, again, if they get there, or maybe they just try something as a change-up, not necessarily as pulling Sean Clifford if they're not in that situation. But maybe as a change-up, I'm not sure. But I just see the quarterbacks are going to win-lose this game, in my opinion.
Has it been hard for you? It's been hard for me. Mm-hmm. I've been trying to find answers. And I told the audience straight out on Monday, I said, I don't really know what I'm seeing here. I don't really have any answers. Maybe you do.
I can't imagine I'm going to have any answers for you or any players on that team, players or coaches on that team. I'm not one who necessarily sees signs of, and it's not for me, I just don't see it as well, the signs of low energy or lifelessness or something like that, or disinterest. I don't know that I agree. Noticed something like that.
Right.
You get out of position on certain plays. One thing I do kind of see is I think you do see players looking, getting up after a play and then looking around and saying, what happened? Where were you? Why were you there? Right. Who's going to make this play? I don't know that I don't know how many guys on this team. I don't think that right now there's really anybody on the defense who is like that. Jahan Dotson has been a real playmaker on offense that you could say, he's going to make a play. And, same with Pat Freiermuth, for the most part, is going to be there. But they've used Jahan Dotson they've turned Jahan Dotson into their touchdown guy, their touchdown playmaker this year. So you see him as like, okay, we can lean on him. We can crutch him to make a play. And if you don't see that on defense, I got to believe that the coaches are probably asking the same questions. I remember Saturday night after the game, Pat Freiermuth said, Sean Clifford and Michael Menet and I looked at each other and said, we don't know. And that's got to be such a helpless feeling for them to have given so much, to have given up so much just to play this year and to be in the position where you say, we don't know.
Mark, it is always a pleasure. Thanks so much. Appreciate you and appreciate the time and insight.
You too. Thanks, Steve. Enjoy your trip out to Nebraska. Do it safely.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Mark Wogenrich, SI.com. We'll come back with more in a moment. Update the Masters leaderboard for you. And the King next half hour. Jerry Dulac, final half hour here on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Brought to you by Sunbury Motors. Great to have you with us. Paul Casey, the story at Augusta National, 7 under par 65 today. 2-shot lead over Webb Simpson and the fine young talent Xander Schauffele, both at 5 under. Tiger Woods is at 4 under par. Tiger did not finish the way he wanted to. He had a real opportunity on 8, which is a par 5. And he hit a great drive and then hit a horrendous second shot. And then, I'm sorry, he had a great drive. Yeah, great drive, second shot. And he could only get 40 feet from the hole in 3. And he had the 2 putt from there. And so one time he showed anger the entire day because he had a great game plan. Hideki Matsuyama, Lee Westwood also at 4 under par. 3 shots back. Patrick Reed is there as well. John Rahm's at 3 under. Tony Finau's 3 under. Right now, Justin Thomas, great start. He's at 3 under. Is he playing the front or the back? No, he's playing the front. He birdied the first 3 holes. That's a good way to start. Bryson DeChambeau was at 2 under. Had a weird round. Par 10, missed a 5-foot part. Par 11, par 12. Then he went to 13. Now, 13's a birdie hole. That's a birdie hole for him, okay? And Orlando, Florida, gone. You're out. And that's a birdie hole for him. He had 7. I don't know what he did because I wasn't watching him. Then he parred 14. Then 15's a birdie hole. He birdied that. Then 16, that's a nice pickup there. The par 3, birdied that. Then he parred 17, 18. Then 2's a par 5. Did the expected. Birdied it. 7, though, which is a really tough par 4. He bogeyed that. But then he birdied 8, which is expected. That's a par 5. That's why Tiger's 5 is so disappointing for him. But then he steals one. He birdied 9. Not easy. And I guess he drove it over the hill on 9. Like, are you kidding me? Nobody drives it over the hill on 9. He does. Wow. So, that's where he is. That's where he is. So there's your Masters update, which I never in my career thought I would ever do in November. But it's a different year. It's a different year. Oh, well. Today's show brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, online at sunburymotors.com. Picks with the King next half hour.